4 days worth of celebration announcements, as well as some news from the real world. It's Sunday, August 15th, 2010. Celebration 5 is a thing of the past, and we've got those stories and more for you this week in Star Wars. This Week in Star Wars is your source for news and noteworthy developments from the galaxy far, far away. I'm your host, Matt Fox. And now, this week's lead story. After 4 days of non-stop festivities, Star Wars Celebration 5 wrapped up at 5 p.m. today. While there were plenty of happenings at the convention, everything was certainly overshadowed, as one might have expected, by the main event. An interview of George Lucas by The Daily Show Jon Stewart, which took place on Saturday. While already alluded to by Lucasfilm Steve Sansweet, the highlight of the main event, no doubt, was Lucas's announcement that all 6 Star Wars films would be coming to Blu-ray in 2011. While that announcement alone may not have brought too much applause to the Chapin Theater at the Orange County Convention Center, the bearded one appeased everyone in the crowd and the convention center in general by bringing a sample of the deleted scenes that we might expect to see in this ultimate Blu-ray edition. The scene he brought was the long-discussed Luke building his lightsaber scene from the beginning of Return of the Jedi. Rather than describe the scene in step-by-step detail, I simply refer you to one of the many postings of the scene on the internet. Other announcements by Lucas at the main event were the debut of a new character in the Clone Wars. This new protagonist is none other than Darth Maul's brother, the unquestionably Lucasianly named Savage Opress. More of Mr. Opress was shown by Dave Filoni in his Clone Wars Season 3 preview panels. Other major announcements by Lucasfilm during the show were... Yep, that's it. Nothing else from Lucasfilm. However, there were plenty of announcements from Lucas licensees. Hasbro pulled the remaining tricks out of its hat for 2010-2011. This included the already available and long-rumored Slave One/Jedi Starfighter Clone Wars Battle Pack, which is exclusive to Toys R Us and rings in at the $100 price point. Other new announcements included the reveal of upcoming Clone Wars figures, available later this year, as well as a Target exclusive, which is an interesting reinterpretation of the famous Vintage Line 3-packs. Also shown were the first samples of the Attack of the Clones wave in the Vintage series, as well as a card back from the Return of the Jedi line Rebel Commando figure, the first seen from this wave. Hasbro is clearly pleased with the reception of the new Vintage line, based on their presentation and comments made on the show floor, as well as the fact that the next wave of vintage figures available for sale at the Hasbro Toy Shop at Celebration 5 sold out almost immediately and were not available throughout the weekend. Upscale licensees such as Gentle Giant and EFX Collectibles had little in the way of new announcements other than what was shown at Comic-Con a scant 3 weeks ago. However, EFX was offering a Celebration 5 exclusive Luke Skywalker Snowspeeder pilot helmet with a signature edition available. While a few booths over, Gentle Giant each morning saw hectic, panicky action surrounding their 12-inch reproduction of the vintage Boba Fett action figure. Each day's allotment sold out within minutes, leaving many fans upset and empty-handed. LEGO's convention exclusive was a follow-up to the Comic-Con exclusive Cube Dudes. The C5 exclusive featured the bounty hunters from The Empire Strikes Back, but this time LEGO forewent the traditional raffle offering and simply sold the Cube Dudes to the first customers in line each morning. As of the end of the convention, however, the Cube Dudes had not sold out. So, avoid paying eBay premiums, as these may appear somewhere else in the near future. Or they may already be in a dumpster somewhere behind the Orange County Convention Center, as no one really knows what LEGO does with unsold convention exclusives, as they have heretofore not existed. Not surprisingly, another very popular exclusive at the convention were the 16 free comical cereal parody boxes available to those who attended the collectors panels given throughout the convention. An opportunity to get leftover cereal boxes at the end of the final panel saw a line snake around the third floor, full of attendees anxious to complete their collection. While the main event dominated the headlines on Saturday during convention hours, the evening hours were highlighted by the Last Tour to Endor, a celebration surrounding the retirement of the original Star Tours ride after 20 years, as it is put in the barn in anticipation of Star Tours 2, a 3D adventure which will take place in the pod racing environment of Episode 1 and is expected to debut at the park in 2011. Attendees had access to nearly all of the attractions at Disney's Hollywood-themed park until the wee hours of Sunday morning. The evening was highlighted by a Jedi-themed indie stunt ride featuring a cameo by George Lucas himself, and the whole event was capped off by a huge fireworks celebration at midnight to the tunes of the Star Wars themes. Star Wars fans and Robot Chicken creators Seth Green and Matt Seinreich were on hand at Celebration 5 to show scenes from the upcoming Star Wars Robot Chicken Episode 3. Footage included fan favorites Palpatine, Boba Fett, and Gary the Stormtrooper, and will air on the Cartoon Network on December 12th.
And damn it, he was a Star Wars fan!
And now some non-celebration related news. A new trailer for Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2 appeared this week. The trailer features cinematic footage of the game's protagonist, Starkiller, on Dagobah meeting Yoda. No actual game footage is shown in the trailer, and there is no indication as to whether Starkiller and Yoda will confront each other in combat during the game, but eager fans anticipating the October 26th release can now find that footage on the web. If, however, you are a Sony PSP user and considered yourself among those awaiting the release, I am sorry to report that things have changed. LucasArts confirmed earlier this week, just prior to Celebration 5, that the PSP version of this game is no longer going to be developed. No reason was given for this change in marketing, but portable gamers will now have to content themselves with iPhone and Nintendo DS versions of the sequel to the most popular Star Wars video game of all time. It seems like only yesterday when we were sitting around listening to George Lucas speak to us en masse at a Star Wars celebration about a new upcoming Star Wars live-action television show. 2 celebrations and 5 years later, however, the future of that program, let alone its debut, seems to be as uncertain as it was back when we were all gathered in Indianapolis to celebrate the end of the prequel trilogy. Several sites have picked up on a report by thedigitalspy.co.uk, which quotes the flannel-focused filmmaker speaking at a charity screening of The Empire Strikes Back in Chicago. According to Lucas, in these reports, while the scripts for the series are prepared, Lucasfilm does not know, quote, what to do with them, since their production will apparently cost much more than had been originally anticipated. There was no discussion at Celebration 5, officially or unofficially, about the prospects for the live-action show, with Lucasfilm authorities instead preferring to talk about existing shows such as The Clone Wars and Seth Green's upcoming project, which leaves the live-action series the same ephemeral project that it has always been. Lastly, this week is publishing news. Issue 50, the final issue of Dark Horse's Star Wars Legacy series, will be published on August 18th. DK Publishing will be releasing Star Wars Year by Year, a hardbound look at each real-world year since the beginning and production of Star Wars in the mid-70s, and specifically its impact on the pop culture of the times, as well as what was released and produced for the series in that year. Previews of the book were available at Celebration 5, and it is currently available for pre-order on Amazon.com, and if you are so inclined, I encourage you to use the sponsor link on thisweekinstarwars.com's homepage. Vintage collecting fans at Celebration 5 were pleased to know that the second edition of John Kellerman's Star Wars Vintage action figures is now available for pre-order. With the original version of the book long out of print and commanding eBay premium prices, the second edition includes an additional 140 pages as well as much new material. Those interested can go to www.frontbackbooks.com for pre-ordering information. Well, that's it. Celebration 5 is in the books. And while they say hindsight is 20/20, the hindsight of less than 12 hours since the exhibit floor closed is hardly enough time to judge the success or failure of a convention as large as Celebration 5. And who gets to decide on success or failure anyway, the fans or Lucasfilm themselves? While it would be nice to think it's the fans who make that determination, ultimately it is of course Lucasfilm who will decide on the with whom, where, and when Celebration 6 might take place. That said, the immediate gut reaction of many attendees, including this podcast, as well as our sources close to Lucasfilm, seem to think that all parties believe that this celebration went pretty well. The lines were generally well managed, the exhibit floor made sense, the store was never congested, which may say more about what was available at the store, and all the other venues and auditoriums were conveniently located. So does all this mean Celebration 6 in Orlando in 2012? Well, obviously the dust needs to settle and the books need to be examined, but don't be surprised if it does. And that was This Week in Star Wars. I'd like to acknowledge all those listeners that I got to meet at Celebration 5 and thank them again for downloading the podcast and giving me their feedback. I have no means of knowing how many people listen to this podcast each week, and every time I meet somebody who tells me they do, it makes me feel a little better about what I'm doing here and makes the whole project seem a little less futile. So, once again, to all of you that I met at Celebration 5, and all of you who weren't able to attend, thanks again for listening. As always, you can visit our website at www.thisweekinstarwars.com. Emails can be directed to host@thisweekinstarwars.com, and feel free to visit and post on our Facebook page. This Week in Star Wars. We troll the web so you don't have to.
This Week in Star Wars is not affiliated with Lucasfilm, its subsidiaries, or any other entity mentioned in this podcast. Star Wars, its characters, and creations are the property of Lucasfilm. All other trademarks are property of their respective trademark owners. This Week in Star Wars is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This podcast is copyright 2010 This Week in Star Wars. Invaluable technical assistance provided by WebStorm Interactive. News, comments, and questions can be directed to host@thisweekinstarwars.com. More information, links to stories presented, past episodes, and additional contact information are available at www.thisweekinstarwars.com.
I find him objectionable on most every level.